This is an interview with Mary Lou Butcher at her home in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan on the 27th of August, 1992. The interview was conducted for the Washington Press Club Oral History Project. The interviewer is Joe Blatty. This is tape 1 recorded on the 27th. Vivian Moore, who worked with Butcher on the Women in the News group, is part of this. She's a guest in this segment of the interview.
Vivian, can you say your name and spell it, please?
Vivian Moore, V-I-V-I-A-N-M-O-O-R-E.
Joe, same thing?
Joe Blatty.
I'm sorry, Mary Lou, same thing.
Mary Lou, 2 words, capital M-A-R-Y, capital L-O-U, last name Butcher, B-U-T-C-H-E-R.
Okay, are we ready to move here? Vivian, could we kind of begin by getting a little background on you? Mary Lou and I have talked a fair amount about her experience. You were one of the named complainants in the suit against the Detroit News that was filed in 1976.
Right.
Could you describe your situation at the News and how you'd gotten to the newspaper?
Yeah, I was looking for a job in 1970 when I was in the process of a divorce, and I interviewed at the News, and they offered me the position in the reference department doing some research and some clerical work. I had 2 years of college at the time, and that's one reason they hired me. I started off doing a clerical task, which was cutting the newspaper articles and folding them and alphabetizing them so that they could be put in the file.
That by writer or by subject? Or?
Some of it was byline, some of it was by subject matter. And that department, there probably was about 6 or 7 different tasks. And in 1976, I probably completed about 5 of the different tasks, and I was continuing my education in the evening, and I was starting to feel like I really wanted to do something different. Do you want me to talk about the job that I applied? Okay. Yeah. I was interested in the position in Contact 10. Contact 10 is I think a bi-weekly column where people would write in with questions, and we would do some research and write brief answers. I thought I would be ideal for the job because of the research that I had been doing. And I also had taken some journalism classes at Wayne. So I went up to apply for the job, and I was really excited, and I thought, oh, I'm pretty sure I'll get this job. Well, during the course of the interview, I was thinking this isn't coming off well. The man that interviewed me would say things like, well, I mean, don't you really like the job that you're in? I mean, I think you'd really like it. It's really good for you. And I thought, this really doesn't make sense. And I was always trying to be defensive and say how much I would like this job better. And he said, well, we'll consider you, but we have a lot of other applicants. So I wasn't as enthusiastic when I left because something told me that this didn't go very well, and I wasn't sure why. Well, a couple months later, I heard that somebody had been hired, and of course I was very excited to know who it was, and it happened to be somebody that wasn't in the newspaper business, and it was a guy who was maybe a couple of years older than myself, and he was a travel agent. And that kind of threw me, and then I thought, well, he probably has this background that I don't know about, and a lot of education. And so I inquired, and I found out that he probably had less college than I did, and a background as a travel agent. And then I was real confused and frankly pretty angry.
And did this happen right around 76 or before that?
It was probably in 75, I think.
Mm-hmm. And your situation was that you continued at the newspaper working in the reference department?
Right.
And
I worked there until I quit.
when did you quit?
1986.
And was there a particular precipitating incident or?
Well, actually, they were offering buyouts for some employees. And when I saw that I qualified, I was pretty excited because you had to be there for 10 years, I think, or more. And when I went down to my boss and I told him that I would like the buyout, he was quite surprised and said, well, this really isn't meant for people like you, people that have been here for a long time. But he looked and he said, but you do qualify, so if you want the buyout, then fine. So I took the buyout and I received a salary for 2 years.
And I'm curious to know if you know why the news was doing that. I mean, why were they encouraging people to leave with a good financial settlement?
Oh, because they were trying to get rid of people that had been there for a long time. Gannett was moving in, and they wanted, I think, some fresh new blood, people that didn't have a lot of attachment to the news and who would probably be more flexible.
Mm-hmm. How did you get involved in the lawsuit?
I was thinking about that the other day, and I remember being in the reference department by an antique typewriter. I think it was a 1923 typewriter. And Mary Lou came in, and she mentioned something about her concern about women here. And that's pretty vague, but that's all I remember. And then I think she said something like, well, did anything happen to anybody here that you could recall? And then right away, of course, I just thought of what happened to me. And then another woman in my department had a couple of stories.
Is this Diane Dunn?
Yes.
Who also became a named complainant?
Mm-hmm.
And what was the process? As Mary Lou and I have been talking about it, I've gotten the sense that she certainly had developed both an anger and a kind of approach to the suburban reassignment, and that her response was that it won't happen without a fight on my part. But I also get the sense that she was acting in some ways as a ringleader, or in a way that's not clear to me. I mean, what was the process? Did she go around, as you remember, to different departments, or?
I don't really know that. I just remember that she came up in our department, and it seemed like she just, I don't know, maybe there were two or three of us, two or three women, and I remember her saying something, and obviously it wasn't, it was in there couldn't have been too many people there, because I think you would have to be able to trust to say something like that. And she just gave me something to think about, and then I think, well, that's not big enough, that's not, that's too vague. I don't have any proof, and so.
You mean your own experience?
Well, yeah, as I was thinking about it, I mean, it was pretty clear what happened to me at the time, but then when she mentioned it, I was trying to look for the glitches, that this, what other people would say about this, because it wasn't 100% proof. And that probably happened until we met with the EEOC, and I related the story, and they said, oh, you have an excellent case. And so then, I felt a little more relaxed.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that's different in your experience is that Mary Lou joined with you and others and filed the complaint,
Mm-hmm.
and made the decision that she needed to leave the news, that it wasn't going to work for her to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
You stayed through the suit.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you could describe what what it was like to be a named complainant in a lawsuit while you were still working there.
Well, it was funny when we thought about doing this, and it was clear to the union that we were. A member of the union called me and said that he had some concerns for what we were doing. He said, we back you 100%, but we're just concerned that if you lose your job, for instance, I'm not sure how we'll be able to help you. Well, then I start thinking, what am I doing? And so for a couple of minutes, I was a little concerned about, because I had 2 children to raise myself. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to stay here, I'm just going to do it. And if I don't like what's going on around here, then I'll have to leave. So I decided to stay. And it was a very strange thing because when this first came to light within the news, I would walk in looking at people, trying to get some kind of reaction. And I got very little. And I asked somebody about that after a while, and they said, they're not even taking you seriously. You know, the editors kind of think, oh, those women, you know. So I got the sense that he just thought it was just something that was going to go away, and it wasn't even worth thinking about. Well, then I was angry because of that, but then I also laughed, and I thought, well, I'm going to have a job for a while then if he doesn't, you know, if he's not concerned. So it really wasn't, I didn't feel a lot of stress and fear for my job. Once in a while, somebody would come in and say something like, oh, those damn women. What are they suing the news for? And it was I remember a couple of older guys, and we were right there. It was like, didn't they know? I don't think they knew who it was, or it was just like we were not individuals. We were just like, you know, some group, some distant group.
What about other women? I mean, as I understand it, there were about 50 women as a whole on the news staff at that time. Only 3 of you were named complainants who were actually on staff at that time. And did women on the staff talk among themselves about the suit or about the issues that the suit raised?
No. Some people, maybe 1 or 2 people would come in and say, congratulations, I'm really glad you're doing this. And they would whisper and kind of look around. And a lot of people, most women, wouldn't say anything. And I couldn't, that stunned me too, but that's not quite true with the men. You know, several men would say, you know, I'm glad you're doing this, if I can help you in any way. So that really confused me, why I was getting a lot of support from the men, but the women would say very little. I think later, from what I found out, it seemed like some of the women felt very guilty. And in fact, one woman said, you know, I really wish I can help you. You have a lot of courage, but I'm just frightened. You know, she was in her late 50s, and she said, this is my life, and I can't risk losing the job.
If I might,
Yeah, is this something that you all talked about among yourselves?
if I might add something right here, is when we first started to get together as a group to kind of compare notes and see what had happened to each of us, and we did have one initial meeting at my home in Troy where an EEOC attorney, Dorothy Smith, came and answered questions and told us procedures if we wanted to file complaints and how eventually it might get to be a lawsuit. We did have a lot of women come to that meeting to listen to what we had to say and to consider whether they might want to become involved. And I think a lot of people were very interested in getting remedies, but I'm not sure, as Vivian said, how many were really prepared to put themselves on the line to change things. And a lot of those people were very quietly supportive, but very much behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, can you remember what form that support took? One of the things that I found last night when I was just looking over things for today was that there was a press release that was published in '82 that suggested that there was increasing support on the part of women staffers at the Detroit News, and I wondered if there was any particular event or...
I do remember during one part when the judge made a decision that in order to keep the case going, we would have to come through with at least one more woman, and he gave us a deadline. I remember it was Tuesday night at 5 o'clock, and our hearts sunk when we heard that after all that we've been through, that we had to come up with at least one more person. So one other person had kind of approached me, and we talked about it, and she was quite anxious about it too. And it was real hard for me because, of course, we were so eager to have her, but yet I didn't want to be responsible if anything happened. So I remember she called at, I think at 5 to 5 that Tuesday night. And when I heard her voice, I was really, relieved. But then as I heard the conversation, she was still unsure. And I was watching that clock tick away. And yet I just tried to be pretty objective. And then she kind of sighed and she said, okay, I'm going to do it. So that's what continued the case, because if she wouldn't have come forth, that would have been it.
That was Marcia Biggs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what kind of advice you gave her, or what kind of advice you thought you had to give her in the context of what you were just saying?
Well, I told her that I can only relate to her my own experience. And my experience was that nobody in any way intimidated me about my position there. And that I have no concern about that right now, again, and I haven't, except initially, and that I really don't think that it would be a problem for her. There was another friend who was involved, Diane Dunn, and she had no problems either. So I said, the only thing I can tell you is about our experience, and you have to decide. I told her that I thought this was a very important issue, and I'm very glad that I did it. And it was important. I always felt it was very important to women in the news media to see what we can do. But the decision had to be hers.
It sounds like you felt a certain responsibility not to pressure.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to, because some people make up their own minds quickly, and other people you can tell that they just need a little more persuasion, and you can bring them in. And I thought that maybe, if I said the right things, that Marcia would do, and I just couldn't do that. I know that she was a single person and self-supporting, and I just strongly feel that we all have to make our own decisions in life. And I always try not to, persuade someone. I just feel like if they have all of the information, hopefully they could make the decision that's best for them. And I guess that's what I tried to do.
Now, it was something that I was thinking about last night as I was preparing for this conversation was you were actually kind of there at the news in the time in which you all had to come up with one other person to continue the case. Did you or Diane Dunn and other people act, and I can tell that you didn't recruit from the tenor of your comments here, but what did you do? I mean, how did you get the word out that there was a need here? And did you ask for volunteers, or, what was
I'm trying to remember that. I don't quite know, and I think part of what I did was I knew there were some people that were on the fence anyhow. And there were a couple of people that seemed to have really decided they were going to do it and then backed out. So I told them about the position and asked them to reconsider. And I don't know, do you know how the rest of how that new, I don't know whether it was, well, I know what I'm sure I told some people in the union because I was involved with the union, and I asked them if they knew of anybody or to get that around.
As I recall it, I think that one of us tried to talk to every eligible woman editorial employee who could have helped us. And I think that since you and Diane were on staff, that you
I know I didn't do that.
Oh, you didn't?
No,
Okay.
that wouldn't be me. I mean, I know that I wouldn't be approaching everybody because I didn't know. If I knew somebody pretty well, I would have no problem, but there are a lot of women that I didn't know personally,
Well, I think somehow we got the word to everybody. Maybe we did a written,
Yeah.
maybe we may have done a written
I know everybody knew.
correspondence.
I know everybody knew. Yeah, it could have been a written correspondence.
We made everybody aware in some fashion or another.
And some people sometimes would come up to me and say, well, did you get anybody yet? No, are you interested?
Yeah.
No, just let me know, when you do.
we have here kind of a folder full.
Photocopier,
Oh,
I have that kind of copier.
I'm so archaic. I didn't even think about
thinks
that.
she's gonna-
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
The talking continues.
I have here a whole folder full of artifacts from women in the news, and I'm just going to pass these things and ask you to tell me what they are. These look like benefit tickets and things. This is for Ring Around the Moon at Wayne State University. Can you two tell me what that's about?
Oh, remember that evening we had a benefit worked out where we got the proceeds from people going to this play at the Hillberry Theater at Wayne State University, and we had like a kind of a wine and cheese reception ahead of time, and so we raised funds through that play.
Okay, and this was December of '82, so this would have been well into the adventure, 6 years in, really.
Right.
Was that the press club?
No, this was
Now
at the
this-
Hillberry.
Oh, that was the
And then this is the press club. This is for a reception at the Detroit Press Club. And I think that Mary Lou and I talked about that on audio tape a while ago. I wondered if you had any particular memories of that reception.
I believe we had a couple at the press club.
We did.
This was the first one, probably. Well, it's quite exciting because it was packed. And it was my first experience trying to put together a fundraiser. I didn't know very much at all. So, of course, I just wondered how this would happen. And I didn't expect a big crowd. And it was packed. There were people jamming in. It was thrilling.
From all over the community.
Yeah. I was just amazed to see so much support. It was very touching.
Great. Now, how did you, I mean, was there kind of a work team among the group, or how did you do it?
Well, our organization, Women in the News, was, like the large organization, and then we had a committee for the fundraising. And I don't know, maybe there were 4 or 5 of us. I don't quite remember who else was on the fundraising committee. Myself and Diane Dunn. And
Well, we had quite a few
we had a publicity.
supporters,
Yeah.
volunteers who just dove right in and helped with the planning. And they came from a lot of different community organizations, so they, in many cases, had been involved in fundraising themselves.
Right.
For
That's
their
right.
Kind of brought their own networks with them.
Right, and that was why I think we had a pretty good mailing list, and that's how we were
That's
able to
right.
reach so many people.
Okay, now here it is. Let's see, that one is there a year on that one?
No, I don't see it.
Okay, this one is 79.
That's
A
probably,
March 79 reception
that's
at the
probably the
Detroit,
very first one,
Detroit Press Club.
because that was right before we filed the lawsuit. We filed that in April of '79. So we were doing this. They were doing this fundraiser specifically to get the funds to help support the lawsuit. You know, up to that point, we had been our complaints had been under investigation by the EEOC, but we were yet to take that final step of filing in court.
And here is another ticket. It doesn't have a date, but it's for a check to Women in the News for tickets to the Summer Music Hall.
Oh, yeah, that was wonderful.
Wait,
That was,
what was it like? Tell me.
well, I believe members of the Detroit Symphony gave their time to come and play at this lovely home. I don't quite...
It was a chamber music
Chamber music, yeah, that's right.
at the home of
Grossman?
Audrey and Leonard Grossman, who were 2 big supporters, and they were members of the ACLU, and were very much behind us and donated the use of their home on a lake. It was
It was
wonderful.
just beautiful. It's just
So we
Do
had
you have any remembrance of how many people came to that?
Boy, I really don't. Would you say, I'm trying to think if we were planning for 100 or 125. That
I
sticks in my mind, I think.
I think 100 or so.
Now, here's another item, the woman's calendar for 1980, and a special 10th anniversary edition. And why don't one of you read that for me? It's the top one for 14. We think it's maybe March.
Very small print. I can't see it. I don't have the right glasses.
Executives of the Detroit News react to filing of a $10 million suit by women employees alleging sex discrimination, 1979.
Now, do you have any memory either how you made the calendar? I mean, how did you call yourselves? Did you call yourselves to the attention, or did they call you?
No,
Or?
I think we were surprised and delighted when we found out about this. Shocked may be a better word. One of our committee members had seen it in somewhere, but our understanding is of how they got this or included this is that there was a small item in the New York Times at the time that we filed our case, and that's when that must have been the day that it was originally publicized, and so they picked it up and included it in this women's calendar. So we were all thrilled.
Oh, great.
This may have been it's the 10th anniversary edition of the women's calendar.
I'm just looking at what else is in this. This is more of the musicale, and this is more of the Detroit Press Club. Let's see if there's more. It looks like there are a lot of lists and things in here. This looks like maybe meeting notes. Can you take a look at that and
Boy,
tell
they're
me?
pretty small. Is that your writing?
I think that's my writing.
Yeah, and mailing lists and.
This looks like a list of all the male editors.
Oh.
At the Detroit News?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'd have a very small list of the
Okay.
women editors. I guess there is one woman editor on here.
Who came to these? I know that a lot of the meetings, at least initially, were held at your house in Detroit. How come your house was chosen? We just
It was one of the big old homes in Detroit. We had a large living room, and I think it was kind of central.
People were coming from all over.
Right, and it was kind of in the middle.
Do you remember kind of the dynamics or the attendance at those meetings? Who was most likely to show up, and what kinds of things tended to get done in those meetings?
Well, I remember Ernie Goodman coming on a couple of occasions, and Councilwoman Marianne Mahaffey.
Now, Ernie Goodman was the lawyer who was of counsel to this case. And
And there were a strong core group of WIN supporters who were always there.
can you remember who the core group, both of you? Can you put your heads together on that?
Vicki Lang, Anna Holden, Irene.
Can you give me IDs for what they did or what they were associated with? So that we,
Vicki was very active in Democratic organizations, and she became our WIN treasurer at a later point. Anna Holden has always been a activist for women's causes and very involved with the ACLU, and she worked in city government. Irene Fogarty also worked in city government, also an activist, and she became president of WIN. Rosemary Dolan, who worked for the state of Michigan, also active in women's issues. Harriet Alpern,
Yeah, right.
who is also another now activist, also very active in a lot of the NOW projects, monitoring news media. And Ann Mitchell, who worked for the University of Detroit, and a big supporter, and Jack Casey, who was who is now my husband. It was our token male secretary.
were there other men? Were Ernie Goodman and Jack Casey the most common?
Was Howard Simon at any of the meetings? Well, there was Rick Parker.
Now, what was his
He's
association?
an attorney.
He's an attorney and worked with the ACLU. And he and a woman were,
Jan Leventer.
Jan Leventer, were very helpful to us.
Did any
And
men?
Maury Glacier, I think, was
that's right.
there.
Did any men from the Detroit News ever come, or any union officials ever come?
Not that I recall to those meetings, but I think we did have meetings with the union officials.
Well, I know
And-
they were at the fundraiser for them
Yeah, we did get a lot of support from male employees at the fundraiser.
a lot.
Did you? Would it be appropriate to mention some of the men who were supportive?
Paul Gaynor,
Howard Warren.
Howard Warren, Lou Malechko, the photographer Carl
Carl Payne. Jim Graham.
Jim Graham.
Many others, I think. You know, just in general, passing, they would be, say, good for you.
It seems to me that those men were active in the Union, the people.
That was kind
come
of a
to my
link that
mind
seemed to.
when I think about them.
It's interesting because I know Mary Lou's told me the story of going to work for Carl Byers a little later, and that one of the people who worked there had been, I don't know if active in the AP case about women's issues, but was very supportive. And so get the sense that that thread really kind of runs through people's lives at that point.
Yeah. Rick Boy, too, was another one that was very supportive.
I think that's it for our tickets, but that's really helpful because Mary Lou and I have talked about a couple of the benefits, but it's kind of gives some nice examples and structure. The one thing I wanted to ask about was, this was a 7-year process, and did you have any sense when you started this how long it might be?
Never. And we would say quietly, when nobody was looking, would you ever do this again?
What kind of answers would you give yourselves?
It's a good thing we didn't know what we know now.
At the beginning,
yeah. I never regretted doing it. I was always glad that we had done it. But, and I was glad that I didn't know what was in store for me.
Could I ask a little bit about your personal circumstances?
Sure.
I understand that part of the suit was that you and another woman complainant, were mandated to have tryouts as reporters. And I wondered if you could describe that experience of getting a court-ordered tryout and how it worked.
Well, I was remembering, I was in the reference department, I got a call from one of the lawyers, and they said, well, what they want you to do, they want you to try out as a general assignment reporter. And I said, of course, you're joking. And he said, no. And I said, I didn't try out for that. I tried out for the job in Contact 10, which is completely different. And he said, this is the best we could do. Will you do it? And I was really in a dilemma because I thought, well, if I do this, I'm going to fall flat in my face because I was never a reporter before. But I had a lot of confidence in the job in Contact 10. So I went back and forth, and I thought, I don't care, I'm going to do it. I'll just try it. I couldn't say no. I just couldn't say no, and it was on principle. I wasn't real encouraged about getting a job as a reporter, but I felt since that was the choice, I would do it.
So you were actually put in a position that you hadn't quite expected? Is that
Absolutely not. No, I mean, what I wanted from the case also was to have an opportunity to work at Contact 10. But they wouldn't acknowledge that.
I see.
They didn't want any part of that. And like I said, the job was totally different. And so I felt like they set me up to fail,
Do you remember very much about the experience of actually?
Yes, I remember it very well.
Could you talk about it a little?
Sure. I remember coming in the first day and I thought, well, here goes. And then I would get several assignments, and I just felt like I didn't know where to start. And they'd say, well, go here and interview, Mayor Young, and I was overwhelmed, but I was determined that I was going to do this. So I went to the interviews, did what I could, raced back, tried to write this up. I was extremely stressed, but I was just, for the whole month, was full of very humorous experiences, and I worked very hard. It was stressful, and my children were just absolutely excited. They couldn't wait till I came home every day to tell them how it was. And of course, they were happy to see my name in print. I think I did get 7 or 8 bylines during the course of that time.
Did you find that anybody there was helping or providing structure?
There were a couple of men that said, how you doing? Do you need any help? So there were, I think there were maybe 3 or 4 guys that would,
Mhm.
you know, come over and tell me a joke, and so that I would loosen up a little bit. But I was disappointed in the women again.
What happened at the end of the month?
The last day I said, well, so now what do I do? And they said, well, you know, go back to your job and then we'll talk to you about it. And I think it was at least 2 weeks after that before I heard. And I'm trying to recall who called me in to discuss it with me. And they said that they were,
Is it Ben Burns?
yeah, it was Ben Burns. He said that he was satisfied with the work that I did. He looked, I think he sounded surprised, I think, at the time. But he said, we're looking for star material. You know, we do want to hire somebody, but we want somebody with a lot of reporting history. And, you know, you're just new. I mean, you know, this is just your first tryout and you've never been a reporter before. So they were looking for somebody that's been in the business and dynamics. So.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I found that amusing. You know, I did better than I thought I would do, so I felt good about myself. And I think some people were probably surprised because they thought I did better than they expected. And I didn't expect the job, that's for sure.
There was no way they were going to let you have that
No,
job.
it was a joke. You know, so I mean, it was just an exercise. And you know it was an exercise. This is what they were going to do. But, you know, I mean, I never thought that I would get the job for a minute.
Did anybody else think you were going to get that you were aware of think you were going to get the job? Or did people tell you the converse? That, I mean, I guess what I'm looking for is, were there signals around the office that you didn't have a prayer, or that other people thought you should have a prayer, or was there any reading on that?
No, not that I recall. It was just encouragement. I remember the encouragement, and it was almost like I could have been just one of, you know, 50 people in the newsroom.
Mm-hmm.
It was like nothing. The people from my
You were
department, the
accepted
reference
then.
department, yeah. The people from the reference department upstairs were real excited for me,
Mm-hmm.
and if I needed something, they would rush right into the files and help me, you know, and do whatever I. So those women out there were extremely helpful during the whole case, and so they were definitely helpful. And as far as being in the newsroom, there was really nothing different, you know.
Now, what happened next? You went back to the job that you had and stayed there? Is
Right.
that,
And it was just like it never happened, you know.
was it like it never happened? I mean, one thing that I've wondered about and have been probing a little bit is whether the pay scales changed for women, veteran women at the news as a result of the lawsuit.
Oh, I didn't mean to imply that, you know, as a result of the lawsuit, it was like nothing ever happened. I didn't mean to. It was just after that 1 month's position, the tryout, I went back to my old job routinely, like it was, you know. Yeah, there were. I know that the pay scale had changed. I don't remember the details. I remember the management posting a notice on the boards talking about this, was it an equal employment opportunity program that they mentioned?
That they've always had
like
in
they
place.
always had, and there was this, I looked and I kind of laughed because that was the first we saw of it, of course, but I don't remember when that was. Do you? When that was posted?
It was certainly after we filed the lawsuit.
Yeah, I think it was a couple years after that that came up.
Did you see a change in your pay, either during the suit or following the suit, in the structure of the, or do you?
I think I did get a raise. I did get a raise from the time I got several raises from the time we first filed. But I don't know that that had anything to do. That was the union bargaining, you know, difference in pay scales. I think that's what it was. I don't think it was from the case.
What did you do with your award? Okay. We use this with you two, too.
Oh, yeah, the 1981 Susan B. Anthony Feminist of the Year Award.
Now, what did you do with the award? You, along with Mary Lou and two other people,
Mm-hmm.
got a substantial
Mm-hmm.
financial settlement. I wondered what you used the money for.
Well, I put it in the bank right away, and then I, about a year later, used part of it as a down payment on a house. And the remainder, I returned to school. I went to the University of Michigan and got my master's degree in social work, and that's how I paid for it.
So it kind of took you. Let me introduce one item that you shared with the two other plaintiffs in the Detroit News case, which this is the...
Well, with one other, because Marcia wasn't
Marcia
there
was not
yet.
part. Okay, this is a plaque from the Detroit Now. It's the Susan B. Anthony Feminist of the Year Award for political action benefiting women. And it went to you and Mary Lou and Diane Dunn.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered if either of you have any memories of either the announcement or the award ceremony and kind of what it meant to you to receive that award.
Was this ceremony conducted at Mayor Young's mansion on the river, and it was
Yes.
outdoors?
Right.
Yeah.
It was on Women's Equality Day,
Yeah.
1981, which was, yesterday was Women's Equality Day, 11 years later.
Well, I think that during the course of this case, it just kind of, it's another day. But when you have a day like this and there's some recognition, it startled me. It's like somebody's watching.
It was really good for our morale.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We didn't have very many things like this, but when it happened, it was just wonderful.
I think one of our supporters, one of the activists in the Women in the News was the person who nominated us. That was Gail Whitty,
Yeah.
who is very active in Now and has since become an attorney herself.
Mm-hmm.
This was an upper. Were there moments that were just very distressing, that discouraged all of you? Do you remember any such moments?
There were so many. There were so many.
Can you describe one or two of them?
Well, I remember probably the most devastating time for me was, I don't remember when it was, I guess it was in '83, when it was a final meeting. We sat down and ironed everything out, and it was like, it was settled. And we were so happy. I remember we went to the Money Tree to celebrate.
Our favorite downtown
Yes.
restaurant.
And I was so happy that it was just like, boy, this is over. And then we went home. I went home, and I remember getting a call from one of the attorneys saying that the settlement is off, that there's some things.
Still to be ironed out. Right. That was the biggest high and the biggest low in the same day.
Wow.
I remember screaming in my room, and my kids came in. It just, it brings up a lot of memories again.
That luncheon was so much fun.
Yeah. And I just couldn't believe that this was happening. It just seemed so cruel, after all the ups and downs, we finally felt that there was closure, and then in a matter of hours that it was
reversed.
So that was the worst for me.
But we had a lot of delays, I think, in the court hearings.
Oh.
You'd go to court expecting some action or some
Something to happen.
some resolution, and another hearing would be set. It would be postponed for months, and it just seemed like everything dragged, and you get yourself psyched up for this court appearance, and then nothing concrete would happen, and it was just kind of like you were left hanging all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you really didn't have any clear concept of when it was all going to end, when it was all going to be tied up and be something you could put behind you.
Do you remember the time we were in Judge Guy's chambers? We were all sitting there with the attorneys, and he came in and looked at this, and he said, I don't understand what this is all about, this discrimination suit. It's not like you broke your hand or anything.
Or you were injured in a car accident. Yeah, he really denigrated what we were doing and acted as if it really didn't count. because it wasn't a personal injury, like a physical injury.
And I looked around
We
at
were so
everybody,
stunned by that.
and I wanted to say something. I wanted to scream, actually, and I thought, is there a way that I am supposed to conduct myself at this time? Because I was furious, and I really wanted to express my anger. But, you know, I just looked around, I guess, and I thought, well, I guess I'll have to do something with it after this is over. But I was just furious at that.
That was one of the most insulting
Yeah.
moments, I think.
When did that moment occur? Do you remember?
That was close to the end in '83 when we were into these mediation proceedings that
Right.
Vivian was talking about, where we got to the point where we thought we were settling it. I think I had talked to you in our audio interviews earlier how Judge Avon Cohn had sent us to mediation more or less with Judge Ralph Guy Jr. And we thought that that was going to, you know, simplify it, expedite it. And then we found out that actually a lot of what we were fighting for was really discounted by this male judge. You know, just really didn't place value on sex, you know, how you could be hurt by sex
I
discrimination.
had no understanding of it. He just seemed like there's so much to do about nothing. You know?
How did you walk out with a settlement under those circumstances? Do you have any sense of what forces were moving in your direction?
Well, what we talked about with our attorneys was, you know, we complained loudly to them, of course, about the judge's attitude and how he was approaching it. And what they conveyed was, you know, it's the judge's job to go to each side and kind of almost bully each side into giving in and to compromise. And so they were trying to explain somewhat his behavior. And I think try to make us try to be a little more flexible and say it's a process of give and take, and each side has to give up something that they want. And
It's part of the legal game.
You mentioned that you were raising 2 children
Mhm.
by yourself, and 7 years is a long time in the life of a child. I wondered how old your kids were when this process started and how old they were when it finished, and what you told them about it. I mean, how they knew about this.
well, Vivian had to, let me say something right here. Vivian had to raise 2 great feminist daughters by
Yeah,
her example.
I did. Lisa was 5 and Tracy was, oh no, wait a minute, 76. Lisa was 11 and Tracy was 9. So I would, it just seems to me that when I really did mention it, when of course we had the meetings at the house, I told them what it was. And they were kind of back in the background, kind of looking and amused. And then I think they saw the press conference, and then they got real excited, and they would say, like, "Are you famous?" You know? And I said, "No, not really, not at all. Let's just hope that I have a job."
Yeah.
And they were excited about the whole thing. That, you know, they were really delighted. And I would, you know, tell both of them that you could do whatever you want to do, and if things didn't work out for you, you know, there's always hope of change. You can always do something. And so I guess my oldest daughter, she started in med school and she went into chemical engineering. So I think that she had a strong sense of that she could do whatever she wanted to do. And I think that they looked up to me. I mean, it really meant a lot to them that their mother was doing something like that. And they would mention it to their friends. And their friends would kind of look and laugh. I don't know if they knew. So I think that it was a part of their life, certainly, for all of that time. I mean, they went to the fundraisers. The meetings were at our house. And so they were very involved in that and really supportive.
So Lisa was 18 or 19 by the time you got that check. So it really was almost 8 years by the time we
Right.
got the payouts. It was, you know,
That's right. She
the
was
settlement
graduating.
was tentatively reached in '83, but we didn't get the check until almost June. I think it was around June of '84. So it was almost an 8-year process.
Yeah.
Now you two continue to work together on some of these issues. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, I mean, you see among the
Our current project?
yeah, well, I guess I have a question that maybe precedes that, which is among the group, you seem to have kept in touch with one another in a way that maybe some others haven't, or at least not as closely. And I wondered,
Why?
yeah, how.
Well, we just happened to, Mary Lou moved out in this area first, and then I just moved out maybe a couple of years after that. So it just happened that we lived a mile apart from each other, and so we kind of start walking together again and just start seeing each other regularly. And it was mainly, I think, because of our location.
Mm-hmm.
I was very fortunate because Vivian moved here at a time when I think she was just leaving the news and starting back to University of Michigan to work on her master's in social work. So in a sense, the news brought us together again.
That's right.
Because she was in that position of being able to live out here and being able to take time off and go back to school.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is the project that the two of you are working on right now? Let's get a brief description of that on the tape, because I think it's interesting that it's almost 10 years after an earlier settlement, you both are working on a brochure about, it's called Women Involved in Giving Support.
Yeah, the group's name is WINGS. That's the acronym for it. And we chose that name because when we were in the Detroit News case, our acronym was WIN, for Women in the News, and we wanted something uplifting. And so we picked WINGS, and then we chose to develop a brochure on sex discrimination and sexual harassment still being a problem in the society. And all the participants in our group are women like ourselves who have been involved in, or currently are involved in, sex discrimination lawsuits against their employers. And we thought, what did we learn from this experience? And what can we share from our insights? And what advice would we give to a woman who is encountering sex discrimination today? And we had to kind of grope our way through all the steps of what do you do to redress a wrong when it happens to you. And we learned an awful lot. We paid a big price, I think, for being on the front line, so to speak, in the war against sex discrimination. But we thought surely we learned something from that could benefit today's women. And so we came to a consensus that we would develop a brochure and try to boil down the steps, action steps that one might take if they wanted to redress experience of sex discrimination or sexual harassment on the job.
One of the things that this makes me think is, gee, when have you paid your dues? I mean, is it?
Well, as a matter of fact, I remember the evening that a woman called and told me who she was, and I did remember her, and she said that she was involved in a discrimination case, and she was trying to get together women that have gone through this and have, form a group. And I remember the feeling in the pit of my stomach when I heard that. I thought, oh. It just didn't seem that there was a long enough space in between the time she called and the time that the case was over. So I felt this sinking feeling because it brought back a lot of things. But then I thought, how could you not do this? I mean, you had so much support from the people, from the community. And so I felt in a way that I really wanted to do this, but then there were a lot of other things happening in my life, major changes, that I was kind of hesitant, but I did tell her that I would definitely come. And just
To one meeting.
One meeting. Yes.
Famous last words.
And then she said, "Oh, Mary Lou will be there," and I said, "Oh, good." That made me feel a little better.
Yeah, we keep getting into things together, don't we, Vivian?
Yeah.
When you think about it now, how do you think that participating in the Detroit News has changed or in some way structured your lives?
In the lawsuit?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it taught me a lot of different skills. I I saw myself as somebody that was kind of quiet. And although I felt assertive, I don't know how assertive I acted, I guess. And it took a lot of courage for me to speak out in a group like that and put myself up for scrutiny. And that was very difficult for me, for my personality. And of course, I remember that the press conference was just agony. So it really helped me develop my personality and be more verbal. And I feel like I certainly got a lot more confidence in myself. Because, you know, I mean, just learning to help with fundraisers and just the different skills that you don't think about much. So I think it helped me grow a lot. And I guess when I think about my life and I think about some very significant things and what I really have to give or what I had to give, that is one of the high points. So that really says a lot, I guess, about what it means to me and how I felt about it.
How would you answer that, Mary Lou?
Well, I think becoming involved in the lawsuit against the Detroit News was a real turning point for me. I mean, I think at the moment where I had to make a decision, was I going to accept the treatment that I was receiving, or was I going to fight it? And I decided that there was no way I could tolerate it, because it would be so damaging to my long-term career prospects, and especially damaging to my self-esteem. I could not just tolerate an injustice and look the other way, because that would be being a very passive person. And I felt it was really important to take a stand. And even though there was an awful lot of time and effort and blood, sweat, and tears that went into the whole experience, ultimately I felt that it made me a stronger, better person. It showed to me that I could take risk and survive. And that's not to say that, you know, I wasn't scared a lot of the times, or I wasn't stressed or frustrated, but it showed me that ultimately there are some rewards for that. You develop, I think, an ability to show some leadership. You develop the ability to stand up and be counted where it's really important. And ultimately, you are doing something that is going to benefit other women and for generations to come, hopefully, as well as the community.
Okey-doke. Well, there.
Anytime you want to slate, I think Dave's rolling also.
Yep. Say it
Okay.
anytime.
Okay. This is the continuation of an interview with Mary Lou Butcher at her home in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, on the 27th of August, 1992. Jack Casey, who is now Mary Lou's husband and was her fiance at the time of the Detroit News lawsuit, has joined this tape, both in audio and video. And I wondered, I'm just going to repeat the question.
Sure.
Whenever you tell me it's time.
We're ready.
Okay. Do you remember your reaction in 1976 when Mary Lou told you about the suburban transfer at the Detroit News? And
Yes, I certainly do, and also the things that had led up to that, and I guess I reacted both against the news. It so happened I knew the city editor. He had been a reporter for the Detroit News when I was a reporter for the Free Press, and he was somewhat of a friend, but I thought it was very cowardly way to handle an employee situation, as well as being very unfair. And it already was pretty tough on Mary Lou to be put in this situation. And then it was really an insult to, that's where back to the suburbs, it's where the beginners go and the old-timers over the hill gang goes. And it was definitely punitive, and I was upset for her and ready to go to battle with her. And I was just pleased that she took it that way, the way she did. She didn't just take it and stop.
Do you remember your advice, what you told her at the time, or what kind of advice you gave about what to do next or how to respond? Or
Well, it probably was that you're going to have to go along with it, but don't settle for that.
Mhm.
Just renew your determination to do something about this.
Mhm. Now, one of the kind of standing jokes in terms of people telling me about the women in the news is that you were the token male secretary.
That's true.
How was this thrust upon you, or did you take this for yourself?
I sought it out, and
Yeah.
I think I named myself that because you see so many the reverses, the reversal of the roles
Mhm.
where we had some other men who got involved. But,
Do you remember who some of the other men involved in the case
well,
were?
my partner at the time, Morris Gleischer, who was very actively supporting, and there were several others came
Howard.
to the meetings. Howard Simon, of course, from the ACLU, and
Milich.
some friends of Maury's. Maury is very active in the ACLU, and and some friends of ours, male as well as female friends.
Mm-hmm.
But the predominance was of women.
And one of the things that's one thing I wanted to ask was kind of how you saw your motivation, or if you wanted to attribute your role in the win, how would you say, well, I was angry, I was loyal, or what choice of words you would make in terms of?
Well, of course, at that time, I wasn't really a fiancé of Mary Lewis at the time, but we were dating. In fact,
Mhm.
this came up right after we started dating.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very frustrated at the Detroit News not allowing Mary Lou as a single woman to have weekends off after 11 years at the news. And I knew that was not the policy with the male reporters. I'd been a reporter, and I knew the situation. So it was a matter of frustration for her and also for me. And I had also been a reporter when the only women at the Detroit Free Press, where I was a reporter, worked on the fashion shows and the society pages and so on. And they had made some progress, women had, and then the progress was turned around. And it was, the Detroit News at that time, frankly, was an old boys club. Very much so, more than the Free Press. And
Why do you think that might be? As someone who had worked on the other paper and was observing the companion paper, do you have any sense of?
well, the Free Press traditionally had people who worked for a few years on their way through Detroit. And they came from all over the country. I came from Toledo. Many of them came, we used to kid about the city editor would send a pickup truck through the South and offer them high wages, and then they would come up and work with us at the Free Press, and typically would leave after a few years. I stayed there, for example, 4 years. The Detroit News were homegrown Detroiters more, and they started as copy boys, copy persons, as the two of us did, by the way. I did in Toledo. And they therefore had a longer standing tradition of being buddies, going fishing together, and just a different approach to being a newspaper reporter, I always felt, than the Free Press. Frankly, I didn't think that it was anywhere near as good a paper in terms of the quality of the writing and reporting, largely because of that they didn't at that time have enough, they didn't really go out and get the best people necessarily. And there was a very much of a clubby attitude by the reporters who I had worked against at the Free Press, and frankly, while they were my friends, I didn't think they were very good reporters. But now they were running the paper, and running it just the way they were at the same mediocre approach to newspapering that they had demonstrated as reporters. So I knew these people who were doing this to Mary Lou, and I felt very indignant at them. And I've always been an underdog person too, and I think I would have I wouldn't have had the same intensity of feeling, of course, if it hadn't been Mary Lou, but I would have been on the side of the cause anyway.
One thing that's occurred to me, Mary Lou told me a story about one of her colleagues at the news, who's one of the few women who ever got her job back after a pregnancy leave, and that she and her lawyer father had essentially talked to the management and worked it out through, I guess our inference is some kind of combination of either power plays or appeals to some kind of loyalty.
I think there was a personal relationship
Yeah,
there
personal
between the
relationship.
father and the editor.
And I wondered, in the case of Mary Lou's situation, since so many of the people who were brought in as supporters were powerful people in their own right, did as a matter of strategy, all of you ever sit down and say, well, we could file a lawsuit, well, we could send so-and-so in to try and deal with this on the basis of personal relationships? Was that something that ever was discussed or thought about?
Well, you went in on your own, but you also had a letter after they ignored her first simple following procedures of asking questions and why is this done, this is punitive, etc. I believe the first effort was then with informally with the ACLU. But this old gang, first place, they didn't believe that women belonged at newspapers. Women belonged at home, and the newspaper reporters covered the police beat and went out and drank at night. And so it was a strictly male-only clubhouse. And also, Martin Hayden, who was managing editor at the time, I think as soon as editor, he was top. He was running the editorial aspects of the paper. I think as soon as he was challenged, he dug his heels in. And when it was ACLU, he dug them in more. And therefore, they put themselves in a position of, even though we succeeded, I think, in embarrassing them tremendously, they never would admit that they had a problem. But most of those people that I'm referring to were groomed. They knew they had a problem after a while, and by that time, it was into either litigation or about to go into litigation. It was on EEOC. So they never admitted anything. They got rid of, fired, or transferred most of the people who had caused the basic problem. But Martin Hayden was a fixture there, and he kept his job, but some of the others didn't. The managing editor did not. The city editor did not. I don't know how much you've gotten into on some of the news conferences we had, for example.
Well, we've discussed them, but I don't think we've really talked about what happened in them in great detail.
Well,
Vivian and Mary Lou and I talked about what it felt like to be a person involved in it, but
well, you know, my business, my background besides newspapers is news conferences and planning these things and coalition building and the like. And the first news conference, the Detroit News, Martin Hayden and the rest, I'm sure thought that the old rules still applied, that they were very powerful, and nobody was going to talk about their internal problems. But we set up this news conference, and not only did all the media come, but at that time the Evening News Association, which owned the Detroit News, also owned Channel 4 in Detroit. Channel 4 not only came, we had made one of our points at the news had transferred all the women out, and that the community was going to suffer by not really getting a balanced picture of what's news. Only men are going to decide. And we nailed them very well on a promotional TV spot that they were running, which happy time thing with a lot of women in it. And we said they had to bring those women in from other departments. They didn't have any women in the city room.
we did talk about that.
That station, that sister station, ran that spot. And I'm sure that they just hit the roof. And I think that's when they started thinking, these are different rules. We're getting embarrassed here. But again, the more they never just said, hey, can we resolve this? They just always try. I think they thought that eventually Mary Lou would get tired of the suburbs and quit, which she did, and they thought, well, that would take care of that. But they didn't know Mary Lou, and they still, I think it was really a shock to them that they couldn't just do this the way they used to be able to do everything. That there was some power on the other side.
One of the things that, as you look at the file on this lawsuit, one of the things that one notices is that the Wynn letterhead, at least for a time, is the same address as the MGKC
That's true.
public relations firm.
Sure.
And I wondered, it occurred to me as I was looking over some materials last night to think, well, did the public relations of this lawsuit develop bit by bit, or was there a kind of a campaign and a strategy that your firm worked out for?
Well, it wasn't I think Maury and I helped Mary Lou, mainly Mary Lou, work out the strategies. And we were always known as a very independent public relations firm, so to take on the biggest paper in town was not, I think that's another thing. They would think that a PR firm isn't going to stand up to them. Well, we did. We always did. And that's not the only organization that had our address, and they usually were causes that might be less popular than this one.
The implication here being that a public relations firm couldn't afford to make enemies or something, or?
I think that's a very fair statement, that most PR firms would not want to antagonize a newspaper, because most of them rely on getting publicity in the paper, and we did too, but we figured the only time that the media use our stuff is when it's of value to them, and that's fine. So what's the fear? But I could certainly name some people in town who wouldn't even come to our events because of that. But also when Mary Lou, I don't know if you talked about when you were hired by Carl Byer, but
We did talk a little
but
about that issue.
Bob Davis, it was like, you're going to hire what? Somebody who's suing the biggest newspaper at the time, the biggest newspaper in Michigan? You're going to hire her for public relations? Yes, well, because publicity is only a small fraction of public relations. The newspapers still don't seem to realize that. But also, about that time, I don't think the Detroit News wanted to be caught being any more unfair to Mary Lou than they'd been. So I wouldn't say they bent over backward, but we were kind of just had them on notice that we're watching everything they're doing, and we would not hesitate to go public with it. So in that sense, there was a strategy.
Just so I have a better sense of context, you were describing your firm as somewhat independent, and I wondered if it would be appropriate to give some examples of what independence
we were,
means.
especially at that time, when Maury Gleischer and I joined together, we did a lot of political campaigns. And they were almost all Democrats. We did a lot of causes, and they were almost all liberal causes, or there would be school issues and the like. And so we were not the Detroit Athletic Club type PR firm. We represented most black politicians back in that era got their start as being one of our clients. Not just blacks, but blacks, liberals, judges, city council. So we had our own power base of political accomplishment and political backing, but it was not. It was our candidates were the kind that the same Martin Hayden that we mentioned and the editorial writers of the news would never have endorsed in the first place. So we had a certain prominence in the community without being beholden to the Detroit News.
So it was an independent power base in a certain sense. One thing that Mary Lou and I talked about was the kind of support that individual members of the lawsuit, either as named complainants or as individuals who had an interest in how women were treated at the news but may or may not have felt they could talk about it publicly. Mary Lou observed in talking about someone that she wasn't sure her husband ever knew that she was participating in the lawsuit. And I wondered, if you had any observations about that kind of issue from a male perspective. I mean, how you felt about it personally, but also why you think men do or do not support women in these kinds of situations.
Well, I don't know that it's just men not supporting women, although that would be part of it. That perhaps they didn't want their spouse or their significant other to be out front, to take risks, and there were plenty of risks. There's plenty of risk of being losing your self-esteem. That you're really the point person. I have been through that with a number of times with black leaders, with labor union people who really take a beating if they're the point person. And they generally get little, if any, credit, because once the issue is resolved, then the others come in. And frankly, that happened at the News. You did not see very many women at the News stand up for their rights. Many of them didn't want to be seen with Mary Lou, or didn't want to come to any win events. And even when it became a class action suit for which they had money, they did not want to raise their profile. Very few did. But that is typical, in my experience, of what happens, say, in a movement of any kind. That there are a few people that make it happen, and usually they frankly never get credit. They get hurt, and then the other people follow in, and it's a lot easier. But it's sometimes after a while things change, and that's what's happened here. It's, a lot of people who wouldn't be very near the cause at the time, later when it was a little safer, have come out and said very positive things to Mary Lou. And I'm not saying that all of them were cowardly or that they didn't, but they didn't take the risks. Very, very few.
Mm-hmm. What did you see? I mean, this went on for 7 years. It was really 8 years before
Yes.
the payout and the settlement.
I'm sorry, I need to change tapes right here.
Okay.
Luckily, this one did.
So that's some later tape here.
Therefore, we're still together.
Yeah, it's right on.
Later?
Don't let them push you around.
Okay.
Are we set?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. This case went on for 7 years. Much of the time you were dating Mary Lou, and you actually married close to the end of the case, right? Was it 1982 that you married, or 1983?
Right.
82.
Okay.
May of 82.
And I wondered what you saw. I mean, you were a very close observer. Were there moments of real discouragement when you found that you needed to be a supporter in this situation? Were there moments of real progress when you felt like you were sharing something?
Well, it was a very draining experience for Mary Lou. I don't think it was for me. I mean, I respected her for it, loved her for it. First date we ever had, she showed me all the books that she had in her apartment on feminism. And hey, this is great. This is somebody that stands up for herself and is principled about it. And it added a lot to my attraction to her. I really felt sorry for the beating that she ended up taking. And I didn't want her to get discouraged. I never wanted her to quit it, if she'd wanted to. In fact, I'm glad she didn't want to, because I felt it was, by that time, it was more than Mary Lou.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that was winnable if you could hang on. And
Did you know that, or did you guess that, or?
No, I really felt that all the way, because it's one of those things. Whenever you're going to get into a battle with somebody, hope that they are really stupid in at least one instance. And in this case, they were very stupid in overplaying their hand when they transferred. One of the things you could make your point immediately in this case by saying, you know, Mary Lou, when they transferred her out of the city room, that she was the last woman in the city room of the Detroit News in the mid-1970s. I mean, it was like, what? So that, I mean, that to me was a dumb mistake that was you could very graphically make your case that way. Also that we made the case that it was bigger than Mary Lou or Mary Lou's job, or even the women at the News's job, that it was a community situation. It was a community problem if what's news is decided by just men. You could carry it further and say white men or older men, but in any event, it's a lose situation for everybody, including men, if they think that this is the world as reflected by the news media, and they're the ones that made the decision. So the men are talking to themselves. Women are out of the loop, except in relatively trivial things. And so I just had very strong feelings. I was very proud of her. But it was also very, very tough.
One thing, you were just talking about that whole issue of who reports the news and how it's filtered in a certain sense. And that's become a very, now people understand that point pretty well. They may not agree with it, but it's a pretty commonly made point. In 1976, I don't think that was a terribly commonly understood idea. And I wonder...
No, I don't think it was.
When I was talking with Ernest Goodman today, he was mentioning that was what he thought was the distinctive issue in that case. And
absolutely.
I wondered if you had any sense of kind of where it came from. I mean, what it was that brought it to bear in this particular case right then in Detroit.
Well, I think the evolution of that, at least in my view, was the first argument was women are getting cheated out of jobs. That's too narrow. You'll never get support for it. So you had to find something that would get you enough support to win. And it happened to be true, that the argument on the filtering of news. That affected everybody. Otherwise, why should somebody support Win? Why should an organization join to help Mary Lou Butcher? That's Mary Lou Butcher's problem, maybe. If she worked in a bakery, that would be that way. But working in a bakery, while it might be unfair to her, doesn't affect the whole community, and this one did affect it. And I think that's, as you say, that's why Ernie Goodman pitched in to help. He barely knew Mary Lou at the time. That was our selling argument, was that this is not just a personal case, it's not just even a class action case. It's broader than that. And it's very true. Well, the whole idea of what's news is very, very arbitrary. As a former newspaper reporter, you try to figure out, you start as a kid reporter, what's news? I don't know. It's what the editor wants. But what makes him want it? I don't know. But then I'd find some definitions. It's what people talk about at cocktail parties or over lunch. But it's really what it is what editors think it is. Editors are guessing every day as to what their audience wants. And if only the white males are guessing, then they're going to make mistakes. And they're going to make enough mistakes as it is. But what that meant was the editor, the makeup of who the editors are, determined the audience because they were pleasing themselves. And so it's good for the community, good for the papers to broaden the input, because then it'll be more relevant to their audience.
When, we were just talking about the experience of essentially you were watching Mary Lou go through this over 7 years, and that it was a draining experience for her. And I wondered if you could describe what you saw about how she worked with other people on this case and kind of what the feeling was or the process was of the WIN coalition.
Well, overall, I think that there was a lot of admiration for Mary Lou. There's also some jealousy. She was the one out front. So even though she was the one taking the hits, she was the one who would get the recognition, plus or minus. The recognition that almost nobody else wanted.
Well, being a troublemaker.
Yeah, being a troublemaker. In fact, it's, Luther Keith, just this week. Just this past week, I was at a conference, Wayne State University Minorities in Journalism conference, and I sat at lunch next to Luther Keith on one side and a guy named Ben Burns on the other. Ben Burns was the second wave brought in as managing editor, who had the job of saying, well, we're not admitting anything but hiring as many women as possible. Luther Keith is today business editor of the Detroit News. He was a beginning reporter. He happens to be black, and
At the time it was.
he was a beginning reporter when this started. And he said, "Oh, say hello to Mary Lou." He says, "Oh, Mary Lou, she's a troublemaker." But he obviously was very high on what she was doing. She was taking on the establishment. But it's a thankless job usually.
When you think about it, do you think that this case changed your life in any way?
Sure, I'm sure it did. Made me a lot more sensitive to the things I'm now saying. That at the time, in fact, on meeting Mary Lou, I was interested in all these books up there. But at the other hand, I was early enough in my familiarity with the feminist movement that I was thinking, yeah, but wait a second. Does this mean that I have to give up certain things? This equality is okay, but come on now, let's be serious about this. But it also, I mean, things like being the token male secretary, it reminded me a little more about what the token feels like. And so I'm sure it helped me with my perspective, but it sure convinced me that this was a very special person.
Did you ever talk about this case with your kids?
Oh,
They
sure.
would have been teenagers at this time, and I wonder.
Yeah, they were intrigued, especially our daughter, but the sons too. They liked the idea that Mary Lou, whatever it was she was fighting for, was fighting, and they didn't quite understand it. I don't think as much, of course. Teenage boys, or they don't understand newspapers or the significance of some of the arguments that we've talked about to support Wynne, but they are very, very proud of her today, especially after they grew up and understood. So yeah, she's go get 'em, Mary Lou. Mary Lou may have told you about her "goddamn it" routine. But
No,
I don't know
I
if that
haven't
ever
heard.
came up, but this is
No, I
before I
haven't
knew
heard
her. But when she was as I recall hearing it, she was at one of the restaurants in one of the hotels downtown with some other reporters. This is before this came up, the lawsuit. And there was a problem with getting served, and it kept going on and on. And one of her fellow reporters, a male, Paul Gaynor, said, "Come on, Mary Lou, give me your goddamn it routine." So she'd had some practice, I guess, before this case came along. But incidentally, one of our sons who just graduated from Michigan State this year, he interned last summer at the Michigan Consumer Council and now he thinks he wants to be maybe Ralph Nader instead of going into business, which he originally wanted to do. And so he relates to the consumer advocate, which is very close to this lawsuit. It's standing up for your rights is what the suit was about. And it so happened that the community had a stake, but the community didn't even know it had a stake until it was brought to their attention.
Great. Now, is there anything, I've asked you some questions, and is there anything that you'd want to bring to my attention that I might have made you think of but didn't ask about?
Oh, I'm not sure of all the things that you covered, but there were some people. This was not an easy thing to do. I mean, the letterhead. It was. You got some supporters who were rather soft supporters. There also was a concern among some black, in fact, some of the black women that this should really have been a racial suit, and there certainly is a lot of legitimate concern over the lack of minorities, and that still exists today.
You mean at the Detroit News?
Oh, yes. The newspapers, almost all newspapers, they're not representative of their communities yet. But I think we saw this as, look, we have a specific here. Let's try to win one step, which is tough enough, but that doesn't mean that you're done with this. And still, so I think Mary Lou and I both feel very strongly that news media, all news media, should be representative of the communities for all the reasons that we talked about. And another one is that the First Amendment is not to protect newspapers, it's to protect the public. And so it shouldn't be just a privilege to make money. It should really be functioning, the First Amendment. and therefore that was a step in that direction. And here's Luther Keith, who was very supportive, and it led to the hiring of a lot of minorities. It was interesting as this went along. Dave Lawrence, who was publisher of the Free Press in this period, at one speech that he gave to Women in Communication, referred to Mary Lou by name, who was suing not him, the other paper, and he mentioned that he pledged that the Free Press would keep its hiring up. He said within 3 years would be fully representative of the community. Well, they've made a lot of progress, but they're not there yet.
Joe, if I could just add something.
Sure.
I think, I don't know for sure that I could have gotten through this lawsuit without Jack's help and help of a lot of other people too, but Jack was the initial support, and Maury, his partner, was wonderful. But Jack was a strategist, as we talked about before, and I think he gave me a lot of strength to get through it. 'Cause I really felt that I had somebody on my side who understood what the issues were and really believed in it. And he didn't just help me. I mean, he was supportive of all the other women who were involved in the suit. And I told you on the audio tape that Jack has always been on the side of the underdog. And I think he really saw women as being in the underdog position here. And he really was very, very supportive of the whole issue of equality. And he was a mentor and he was a supporter, and I think, you know, if anything, that helped me love him more.
It was all worth it.
Great. Okay. Unless you two want to add something, we're going to close this section.
I'd suggest you close it.
Okay. Okay. Why don't, what we're
And then I don't know if you wanted those scrapbooks or not, probably not.
I think not. I think we're going to do the photos because we've got a lot of the scrapbook things to send. And
Okay.
Okay, Mary Lou, can I have you say a few words?
Sure. What would you like me to say?
Okay, that's perfect.
Okay.
And Joe?
I really like this mirror shot. Was this your executive conference table?
Mm-hmm.
And
Isn't that neat?
Yeah. Your Carlton Watkins, isn't he the guy who did all the lake mirrors in Yellowstone and places like that?
Oh, I
there,
don't know.
is it, there are a couple of photographers who
Can I put this on the bottom?
made their careers in Yellow. Yeah, I just don't want to
Smash it.
damage it. Yeah, I'll put it under the lawsuit
Oh, yeah.
book on the theory that. Actually,
We're rolling.
all right, great. Now what we have here are some wonderful photos that you've been able to locate for us, and we're going to do kind of a visual autobiography here of these images, starting with a wedding portrait of your parents. Can you tell me where it was taken, if you know, and when they got married? And
Well, this is a portrait of my mom and dad, Alex and Ethel Butcher, and it was taken at their wedding in Detroit, and it must have been about 3 years after my mother arrived in this country, which was about 1916, because she was 18 when she married my dad, and he was 25.
they're really resplendent. I mean, she's wearing a beautiful white dress with I don't know what you call that kind of cap, but it's almost a cross between a Juliet and some kind of like poofy thing with a
The
veil.
veil. Mm-hmm.
And sharply shined and pressed and slicked back. She's a very pretty woman. You told me the story about how she had trouble getting out of Europe,
Right.
and you can see
Yeah, I think they were
how
very,
pretty she was.
very handsome couple
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Now the next pictures are of you.
Yes, would you like to see this one?
How old were you? These are studio portraits.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking these are maybe somewhere in the first to second year. I'm just a little kid here, so I'm not sure.
You're wearing, it looks like kind of a pale yellow dress, and you're barefoot. You have a little blonde bob,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a doll with you in one of these pictures. Is this a doll that you remember or had?
I don't remember that specific doll, but it looks like I was pretty well attached.
Yes, yes.
And then this was a picture taken at my brother's wedding, my brother Mike Butcher and his wife Rosemary. And I was a bridesmaid in the wedding, and I think that was,
Now that's you wearing kind of a scoop neck dress and pearls, and
a
you have glasses.
green velvet dress, yeah.
Okay.
And they're my parents, the middle row.
Okay, your mother is wearing a some kind of medium tone dress with a corsage
Mm-hmm.
and a hat, and your dad has a boutonniere and glasses and the same slicked back hair as the wedding
Right.
portrait. Now who?
These are aunts and uncles
Okay,
on either
on either
side of my
side.
parents, and brothers and sisters, or sisters-in-law and brothers-in-law, and cousins and nieces and nephews. So we've got
Okay.
quite a family gang there.
Now this looks like where? Do you know where it was taken?
This was taken in Windsor.
Ontario.
Yes, my brother married a gal from Canada, and so the ceremony was there, and the reception. They were married in January, and this saying over the picture, I believe, means Happy New Year. I'm not
Okay.
sure what language that is.
Prosit Neujahr. Neujahr I know is German. Prosit I don't think is. I think that's Scandinavian or something. Maybe not though.
So it
When
must be
did-
Happy New Year.
Yeah. When was the wedding? It looks like it might be the 50s or 60s.
Actually, I think it was about the time of my freshman year at college.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been about 1961, 60, 62, something like that.
Everybody's in their best
Mm-hmm.
Viv and Tucker.
Oh, yeah, this was actually a photo from before then. This was my high school graduation photo.
And this is hand tinted. I'm not used to seeing that for a high school graduation. That's a lovely thing. You're wearing a yellow sweater, and you have brown hair at this point.
Mm-hmm. Now we'll take me into my blonde phase.
Yes, yes.
When I
When
worked.
was that picture taken? This is of you wearing like a work dress, a
Mm-hmm.
business outfit.
Yeah, this was taken at the News, and I'm trying to see a date on here. It doesn't say on the back, but I think it was in the early to mid 70s. I started out frosting my hair, and just kept getting more and more frosting until I became a blonde. And then here is my press pass from 1975.
In which you're not only more blonde, but you have more hair. We had a bob here, and now it's shoulder length.
Yep.
And
And then here's another one. This is, say the date on this one. This is 1971, actually, this photo. This was a photo of me taken to accompany a story I wrote for the Detroit News on computer dating services. And as you can see, I'm all wrapped up in the computer tape.
yeah, and you can read UNIVAC in the back there.
Yeah.
Gosh, I haven't thought about UNIVAC in quite a while.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, is this? I think we talked about this on audio tape, and you were joking that you offered to pay for part of a date. You were telling me a little bit about that
All right,
experience, and
I offered to pay for my dinner, and the person that I was dating for the first time accepted my offer. And this, now bear in mind, this is 1971, so that was rather a novel concept at the time, that women would share the cost of dates. And the editors on the paper were just appalled that this guy allowed me to pay my share. I don't think that would be considered all that outrageous today. It would be probably very well accepted in many cases.
now the other thing that we also talked about dress codes and all that kind of thing, and I noticed you are wearing a miniskirt.
Relatively many, anyway.
Yeah, and that also, it may have a lot of fashion currency this year, because I was just looking at the New York Times fashion stuff.
They're all
over the
coming
week.
back.
They're all
right?
coming back. Platform shoes and short skirts and all this
Yep.
kind of thing. Now we have some more things from the
Yeah, we-
Detroit News.
Mm-hmm.
This is called the Head Style Book. I notice it's marked Butcher Society.
Yeah, this must have been the book that I got when I first started to work at the Detroit News in the society department. And as we've talked about earlier, I did a lot of page layout and makeup, and part of my job was to write the headlines for those stories. So I've kept that all these years.
Now this is the kind of thing that you would like get your ideas ready and go down and talk to the linotype operators and.
Right, you would actually write out your headline and try to get a count to fit the appropriate space, and then send it down to be typeset, and then go down later to see how everything made up in the page, fit in the page.
So you'd say things like, I noticed that these, all these samples have, they have numbers in the lower left corner, and that would be what you'd tell a linotype operator, that that's what you wanted to set up? Or?
Apparently that was some kind of code for that size and style of type.
So it could be italic, or it could be bold, or
Right.
some other things, and that's how you'd.
There's Spartan type examples. Garamond.
Now this is another kind of style book.
Right, this is the actual writing style book that we used, all the rules of grammar and spellings and capitalizations, dashes, quotation marks, apostrophes, any questions on punctuation. As I recall, the News did conform pretty much to what's known as AP style or Associated Press style, but they obviously had put together their own style book so that they could be consistent on how they treated proper names and company names and other trade names, spellings, all kinds of miscellaneous rules for editing. So this was used by reporters as guidelines when you're writing your stories, and it was also used by copy editors when they went over, and news editors when they went over your copy. And if there was any question on the proper form, then they could always refer to the style book.
It
And
seems kind of surprising. I mean, given Strunk and White and the AP style, that they could have 100 pages of Detroit-specific information.
Well, it may be that I know they had Strunk and White then. I'm not sure how widespread the AP style book was used at that point. I know that it is probably accepted in most newsrooms now as pretty standard.
So this is another item from the Detroit News, and this is a certification of emergency printer first class.
This is the one we talked about during the 9-month strike that the Detroit News experienced in 1967-68. And at that point, the editorial staff was non-unionized, and so we continued to work and continued to be paid while the trade unions were on strike. And at some point, management decided to train all the editorial employees to do some of the technical jobs. And I think it was done as a signal to the unions that they could be replaced. And they brought in consultants to train us in various specialties of running a composing room.
Now, it says emergency printer. Did you actually run a linotype or something? Or what? Do you remember what you did to earn that certificate?
I'm trying to remember. I think I did work a linotype, but I can't recall many of the details right now.
You couldn't do it today if you needed to.
No, I certainly couldn't.
Okay. Now, I have some other things. I just lost something here. Let me.
Yeah, if you're interested, the date on this was August 2nd, 1968.
So this strike started in 67?
Started in 67, ended in late 68.
Well, we're moving it. This is an 83, December 1983 document from the law offices of Stark and Gordon. And why don't you explain the significance of that?
Well, this document related to the pending payout from our settlement of the Detroit News case. As we talked about earlier, we reached a tentative financial settlement in late '83, but we did not receive our payouts until, I believe it was June of '84. But they had to, once we reached a tentative settlement, then they had to identify who actually qualified to be class members and to receive part of the distribution of the funds. And then there were certain people who were disqualified from being in the class. So this just related to those fine details of who was going to get some part of the payout and who was not.
And then this, a place in the news, from the women's pages to the front page.
Yeah, this is interesting. This title certainly describes my journey at the Detroit News, because that's where I started, the women's page, and ultimately made it into the newsroom and made it onto the front page.
Not to mention into the news.
Yes, into
in a
the
different sense, yeah.
That's correct. But I was interviewed by the author Kay Mills, who was an editorial writer at the Los Angeles Times, and she talked to many, many women across the country who were involved in sex discrimination lawsuits against various media. And she chronicles kind of what was happening over the years, how women's news has been treated, and how what the role of women reporters has been in terms of moving forward the coverage of women's issues, women's concerns.
Let's just give the publication date for this so that we have it
Okay.
on the record. It's 1988, and it's a Dodd Mead book. And this is something in which there's a page or two about the Detroit case itself.
Yeah, there's one page in particular, I think, I don't know if this may be it,
Page 167, yes.
that kind of describes, gives a capsule summary of our case.
Mm-hmm. And your experience particularly. I
Yeah,
think you're
I'm quoted by her.
Yeah, let's see. We have one final image. This, if the place in the news and the lawsuit paper are one turning point, this is yet another. This is, I see you and Jack Casey. Who are the other people in this picture, and what is it of?
Okay, this photo is of the management team at Casey Communications Management, the firm that Jack and I built together, and these are members of our management team.
From left to right is usually the way these
All
things
right,
are.
left to right is David White, who is a senior vice president at the firm. Paul Hall, currently a senior vice president at the firm. Myself, Jack Casey. And I was executive vice president at that time. Jack was president and CEO. Next to Jack is Jeff Caponegro, who was executive vice president at that time and has since become Jack's successor at the firm. He's current president and CEO. Paula Blanchard, who is associate vice president of the firm. And Robert Scugin, Bob Scugin, who was the senior vice president. This was our management team at the time when we were there. And you and I were talking earlier about the mirror image here,
Yeah.
reflected on the conference table.
Right. Okay. That's it. Okay? All right. Now we have 4 other pictures just to get into this mix, and they're all pictures of your wedding
Right.
to Jack Casey. The first one is a group shot of 6 people, you, Jack, and your children. Could you explain?
Yes,
Who's left to right?
left to right is our daughter, Gretchen, our son, John, myself and Jack, and then our oldest son, Michael, and youngest son, Patrick.
And then the next picture.
This is a picture of Jack and myself at our wedding banquet.
And
The next 2 are individual portraits of Jack and myself, looking like a very happy couple.
yeah, okay. Here we go.